Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. This is one in a series of special podcasts we're doing during our vacation break. I'm here with Executive Editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And we are joined today by our old friend, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and Director of its Quantum Alliance Initiative, Arthur Herman, who has been writing for Commentary for 2 decades.
Something like that.
That's something like that. Right. Author of many, many books. I can't even begin to enumerate them. Freedom's Forge: How American Business Produced Victory in World War II. A series of books on who created modern civilization. And we're thrilled to have him with us today to discuss his very important piece in our July-August issue, China and Artificial Intelligence, the Cold War We're Not Fighting. So, Arthur, Abe and I certainly, very Luddite in the artificial intelligence sphere. Scared, worried, afraid of it, would like it to go away, wished it never existed, that kind of thing. And you, I think, are harnessing some of that feeling to try to warn the American people and Congress and everybody within earshot that we may have these ideas and these attitudes, but that we better not, or we better get over them in some sense, because if America doesn't start moving very, very quickly and very seriously to seek to dominate the field of artificial intelligence, we are right now losing the early stages, or might be losing the early stages of the artificial intelligence war to our 21st century adversary, China.
I think that's very well put. And I think that's one of the reasons why I wrote the article. One reason I wanted Commentary to take it up was that I felt that your audience would be the one that, in many ways, perhaps like you, would think of AI as opening this sort of brave new world of advanced technologies that are rather sort of scary and not easy to understand. And that the danger lies not just in what China's doing, but also what our own private industry that has been doing and our government's been doing with this as well, and to try to adjust the balance. I guess for me, one of the reasons why when I came to AI, unlike most people, I came to AI through a different advanced technology, which was my work on quantum technology, on quantum computing, quantum communications, quantum cryptography. And it was only then that I looked back at artificial intelligence, machine learning. And from my perspective, it's really very simple. The physics is very straightforward. It's basically a process, to put it in a nutshell, what AI and machine learning are about is about pattern recognition. And it's building software that does pattern recognition for visual, for written word, for data of all kinds. And that by constant practice and feeding in more data to pass through the pattern recognition model, you're able to arrive at a more accurate predictive model for how things are going to behave, or how things are going to proceed, or how people are going to make decisions, which is why, the idea of the artificial intelligence driven servant who will be able to tell you what you want, what you're going to have for breakfast, and what you want even before you thought of it. It's all about pattern recognition. And as pattern recognition gets more sophisticated, what the AI engineers have learned to do is to construct the hardware for the computers that are handling these pattern recognition models to mimic, not to replicate, but to mimic the neural network systems that operate in our own brain. And that's where things take a big jump forward in terms of the technology, because you're able to move faster and faster in identifying, recognizing what the pattern is of creating a decision framework for someone to decide they're going to do A, B, or C. And in the realm, in so many realms, in business, in the military, in everyday life, being able to have access to information that allows you to make decisions faster and more accurately, that's a big deal. That's a big advantage. But with it comes a whole host of risks and unknowns that make AI very scary, particularly for us, because we're an open society. We get to have debates about, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Does Chat GPT represent, the end of human creativity to be replaced by machines? But in a closed society, in a totalitarian society like China, there is no debate. There is no discussion about the downside. It's all about, how does this advance our goals for global hegemony? And that's what I really tried to explain in the article, what those goals are and how AI fits into them.
There was a sketch on Saturday Night Live 40 odd years ago, which was, what if Superman's capsule had landed in Nazi Germany instead of in America?
Right. Yes.
And Uberman, then Dan Aykroyd is Uberman instead of Superman. And in a weird way, what you describe here as China, according to you, ramps up generative AI spending. By 2027, a third of the world's spending on AI will be done by China, up from 4.6% 2 years ago.
That's an astonishing number, isn't it?
Right. So, and what China is doing with it is, as you say, the future that none of us wants. So,
right.
Why don't you describe what China is doing and what, therefore, we need to do in order to counter them?
Sure. What I would do is I would divide what the China strategy into 4 parts. I think there's 4 parts that are worth analyzing and discussing here. And then we can talk about what we need to do to counter it or to respond to it, or even go beyond where they are, where it would be helpful for our national defense and for the defense of freedom. And that's what this is really all about in terms of the grand strategy. The first area is the one I think that a lot of people are familiar with, actually, which is of how AI enhances the power of the total surveillance state and the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to keep track of every aspect of the lives of its citizens, and to use that to manipulate, control, and to suppress, in the case of dissent, suppress any kinds of voices or any sort of behavior even that they don't particularly want or don't particularly see as a threat in any kind of way. Now, as I explain in the article, one of the laboratories for this total surveillance approach has been the way in which AI has been used to control China's Uyghur minority. And they've been, I think, the principal victims of this kind of total control, total surveillance enhanced through AI. But it applies for Chinese citizenry across the board in every aspect of their lives, not just in terms of the internet or their communication with their jobs, and with other kinds of social and economic activities, but even down to being able to control and to reward them for certain kinds of actions based upon this enormous sum of data. And that's one of the things we got to remember. Remember, AI is driven by and enhanced by the more data you collect. Well, in China, you've got 1 billion plus people. That's a lot of data that the government, which is able to manipulate and control and direct. And so that gives their models for total surveillance an increasing sophistication way beyond anything that we're doing or are likely to do in any kind of government, private or public setting. The second area that I'll mention here is in the military side. And that is the Chinese military has learned that AI can be a huge advantage for them in terms of being able to advance their intelligence and surveillance gathering, to enhance their use of unmanned vehicles, aircraft, drones, as we would call them, and also to speed up the decision-making that commanders and officers are able to make here. And so you've got a Chinese military which is heavily invested in AI for military applications. They've set up institutes that are specifically directed towards guiding scientists and engineers and thinkers about how to use AI to enhance the Chinese military. And we also have to remember in China that any kind of development that AI comes out of private companies, like a ByteDance or like Alibaba or Baidu, any of the work that they do on AI, the military and intelligence services have direct access anytime they want, anything they want. There's no limits to what they're able to draw upon from the AI research, which is taking place across the entire Chinese economy.
So what you,
Can I
what
just
you go?
I just want to jump in for a second because I had a thought, Arthur, when you were first describing what AI basically is, and you said it's basically pattern recognition. And I thought, well, what is the work of a repressive regime in itself before AI? It's sort of pattern recognition, right? Because everything is centralized, especially if you're China and you're looking over a vast swath of land and a huge population, and the work of totalitarian regimes or repressive regimes has always been sort of who's getting restless, who seems to be starting trouble, where are threats coming from, and then responding to them. Oftentimes they sort of make up these patterns and pounce on them.
Right.
But so it seems to me that the technology that enhances pattern recognition is sort of fits hand in glove with a whole host of authoritarian regimes. I mean, this is sort of tailored. It's part of my fears about AI generally, but it's such a perfect match for repressive government.
Yeah, it's a gift. It's been a gift for them. And, obviously the Chinese Communist Party and government have had, surveillance cameras on their population and other ways in which to spy and control and direct the population long before AI turned up. But this has given them this additional boost. It's a really good point. And it's also one, too, that other authoritarian and totalitarian regimes recognize. And they look at what China's doing and they say, hey, we'd love to be able to do that, too. And to be able to do this in an effortless and really, don't forget, stealth way, too. No one really knows how much where that data is all going and how it's being analyzed and how it's being used to control and direct the population. It's a seamless stealth system that you're allowed to develop here thanks to AI and machine learning. So it's not a surprise, as I point out, that other authoritarian countries are looking to, like Iran, and sort of saying, show us how to do this. AI has become a major export industry for China. And one of the reasons is that other governments recognize that's exactly the kind of control over our population that we want.
So the way that you describe the use of the technology to suppress the Uyghurs is that it weaves in with this thing that we've heard about now for a decade or a little less, maybe, the social credit system, where China tracks you basically with your electronic devices and is able to essentially allow you to do some things and prevent you from doing other things by sending messages to your phone that will make it, if you want to go on this train and you shouldn't be allowed to leave your department or your regional area, a red light will come on and the authority that's letting you onto the train will say you can't go on the train or something like that. That's like a tiny little element of this.
Sure.
Renting apartments, getting jobs, whatever.
Job advancement, where you're going to live. And for the Uyghurs, just entering the simple act of entering a mosque goes onto your credit score, your social credit score.
Right.
And before AI and before the surveillance cameras, you'd have to have a spy in there, right, to watch and keep track of who's going in. With the surveillance camera system, which developed over the last 20 years. I wrote about this in an earlier commentary issue, remember, which was about the road to serfdom and about how China had developed this too. So you and I have been on this for a while, on this track for a while. Surveillance cameras, now you can watch people going in, but you still had to figure out who are these people who are going in and cross-reference them to other photo identity. With AI, now you have facial recognition software. Boom, you know right away who it is who's transgressing, who's crossing the line here in social behavior you don't want, and you can instantly record that as part of their social credit system. It's the totalitarian's dream. Abe is absolutely right. And that's why I think some of the people there are those in this country who sort of say, this is actually not a bad system. There are ways in which it would be nice to be able to have that kind of control over speech that we don't particularly want or that we see as misrepresenting the facts. We saw, I think, an edge of this come up during the whole issue of trying to suppress COVID. During COVID, of trying to suppress dissent from what was the standard consensus model of how the disease originated, how it spread, and then how to contain that spread as well. So the authoritarian personality sees a lot of advantage with AI that goes with this. There's no doubt about that.
So therefore, the fear that I expressed at the beginning of this conversation is real and prudent. And I guess when you're talking about military applications, if you're nothing is more important in military planning and application than pattern recognition. That's right. Mean, the game that we all grew up playing to learn what it was to do a certain type of military strategy, which is Battleship, is a pattern recognition game, right? You're putting pegs in to show you where things are not in order to figure out where this enemy battleship might be. And so if we are sort of engaged in a long-term Cold War, obviously, if this technology were to give the Chinese a leg up on understanding our own actions in a way that we do not have the same tools, not only to understand theirs, but also to provide countermeasures to trick the pattern recognition software
from the other side
into seeing false patterns or to dummy, which is also part of warfare, right?
Yeah, quite right.
Dummy troops, the fake Normandy land, the balloons that were used to give the Germans the idea that the Allies would launch the Normandy invasion elsewhere in Britain and all of that, the bodyguard of lies. So we need to be at least not only equivalent, but slightly ahead, simply as a defensive means to keep them from understanding us better than we understand ourselves.
And the military interest also extends, and here I'm going to make it even scarier for you, if you like, John. It
sure
spills over. Sure, why not? Spills over into the third of the applications that I want to talk about, and that is the way in which AI has become integrated into other types of advanced technologies, including biotech. And pattern recognition, you're right. It's a key for understanding and being able to figure out what's happening on the battlefield. But it's also pattern recognition. If you can get into the mind of your opponent and alter and to interfere with and disrupt his ability to engage in pattern recognition models and to make decisions, then you're moving into the area of what's called cognitive warfare. And that's a big interest on the part of the People's Liberation Army right now, of being able to, number one, enhance their own commander's ability to make decisions, but also to affect and disrupt the ability of the other side to understand what's actually going on and to see what is actually taking place. And that enhancement, by the way, of decision-making is not just to being able to give you better, faster and quicker decisions and options from which to make decisions. It also involves trying to find ways to enhance the physiological speed with which your commanders and officers are able to act. And at times, there are news stories come out about the Chinese working to develop these sort of superhuman capabilities. Well, it's not a joke, really. I mean, we've seen this happen with other totalitarian societies. We saw it with the Nazis. We saw it with the Soviets, the new Soviet man of trying to develop the genetic patterns by which this can happen and can be developed. And we're seeing it with the biotech sphere as well, of finding ways in which to develop biotech that can be used and applied to target certain kinds of populations. Imagine, for example, we think about COVID, right? And now we know it's pretty certain that it was, in fact, a laboratory or originated in a lab here, and probably was part of the Chinese thinking about weapons for biowarfare. But imagine being able to engineer a virus which only attacks certain kinds of DNA profiles, let's say white Caucasians, for example, but leaves Asians alone. I mean, the possibilities here that are open up with the use of AI and these kinds of developments and changes are, I think, really quite. They may not lead to every place that the Chinese want to go, but it's important to realize that's the mindset that we're dealing with, that sees AI as a wide open area, no ethical constraints, no legal safeguards or guardrails to control what happens here. And I'm not saying that we need to move in the same direction. I'm saying we need to be realistic about how we think about where AI fits into our future. One important part of which is how do we deal with China's big push to become the AI nation, the dominant AI nation, which is part of President Xi's overall program, part of the Made in 2025, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars to advance that agenda.
And I think we need to be realistic also about the fact that China is not going to be coaxed into caring about the ethical and human rights issues here. We tend to treat technology, ecological problems. There's a sort of Western default to go into we are all one at the end of the day kind of mindset.
I think that's true. That's right.
Weapons reductions and carbon emissions and things like that. And if we start going down that road, we're heading off in the direct opposite direction of the right path.
I think I would have to agree, and I think what we've seen in terms of, particularly from this administration, has been an effort to bring control over the AI regime, not just in this country but international, and that somehow if you can get Chinese and Russian and North Korean diplomats to sign on to a set of international protocols on the use of AI, that somehow that this will be a way in which to constrain or at least slow the developments in dangerous directions and the risks that go, and they're very real, the risks that go with AI and machine learning technology. But in time after time, I mean, history teaches us these kinds of efforts are useless, or even worse than useless, because they tend to retard the efforts of those countries that do feel an ethical obligation to adhere to international protocols, like the United States, like our AI allies, Japan, the UK, Canada, and others who have very advanced AI industry and technologies work that they're doing, that they feel constrained to adhere to those, whereas a country like China will see that as working solely from the lens of this works to our advantage. Let's just keep going and doing what we're doing. We just won't tell anybody about it.
So I think practically in policy terms, your article exists in part to argue against the idea that a lot of us, I think, are innately or almost autonomically sympathetic to, which is whoa. Slow down. You mentioned that Eric Schmidt, former head of Google, and Henry Kissinger, at the age of 98, before his death earlier this year, wrote a book together called The Rise of AI, in which they were like, we need to take a pause. We have to take a big breath and think about where we're going here, because this is really, really, really scary. And you're saying we don't have time to take a breath. This is an arms race, and we are losing the arms race.
I did a review for you for Commentary America of that book.
Yeah.
And it makes it, and I think that and the article that we did on the road to internet serfdom and that book review, and then this piece make a nice, I think, a triptych.
Yeah.
In thinking about AI and thinking about advanced technology and where China is with all of these things. Look, I just created a very scary kind of a picture, obviously, and at times it can be overwhelming when you look at how China's moved in so many different directions, in scary directions, while we're still kind of dithering about, are we going to end up with a generation of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminators, and robots taking over the world, and humanity being replaced by machines, et cetera, et cetera. But look, the fact is, we still have the United States in the AI sector has some very important cards to play, cards that are on the table, and some that are up our sleeve. One of them is that we are still the leader in AI technology development and innovation. No question about that. And when you look at talk about big tech, but also in the startup area as well, we way outstrip the Chinese or anyone else in AI startups that have any number of new innovative ideas and directions that AI can go in. All of this is taking place in the commercial sector right now. American commercial AI sector is without peer and will be for probably towards the end of this decade. The trick is to get them interested in taking some of that energy and innovative imagination and creative productivity and making them and bringing them to think about that and incentivizing them to think about that as part of our national defense, as part of the national security issues, and making them realize that they have a stake, not just in making a lot of money by developing AI apps and machine learning and extending and building that, but they also have a stake in using this as a way to protect our freedom and the freedom of allies and others. And I think that's a possible. I think that the sales work, the messaging that can go with that hasn't really been fully worked out with. But I think the response, and I've seen it with high tech companies, is they know the danger out there. They know what's happening. They fear China as much as all of us do. Mm-hmm. Here, that's number one. The second card we have is capital flows. The United AI sector has become our dominant capital flow for this country by far and away over anybody else. The boom that we're seeing in the equity markets right now with regard to AI is proof of that. And that capital
the entire market surge in 2024 is dedicated pretty much to a single stock, right? It's right. NVIDIA, which is right. The leading American AI firm, which is now I think maybe the most valuable company on earth, at least in the last 3 months or something like that.
I think they may have
the capital markets are.
Yeah, I think they have the Andy Warhol moment of, the 15 minutes of being the most valuable company in the world.
Yeah.
But that capital flow is significant because what that means is that there will be means in terms of resources that can be used to develop AI technologies in the United States by American companies that will include and can include thinking about how we counter or even move ahead of where China is and where it's going. There's one other, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Please, no, go ahead. No.
I was going to say there's one other aspect, though, I think we really need to, where the national attention needs to be focused. And that is the fourth area where China has expanded and really mastered the art of AI. And that's in industrial production and in their economic productivity. To put it in stark terms, we've been obsessing about whether ChatGPT and AI will allow, high school students to cheat on their term papers, right? While we've been doing that, China's been using AI to hugely expand its industrial productivity, and not just in China, but also in the global South as well. because the export of AI technology by China isn't just to authoritarian regimes here. It's also to countries to transform their economies, make them more productive, to find ways in which to speed up and to enhance their GDP. And the Chinese military has taken advantage of this in terms of increased productivity in the shipyards. China has shipyards now in which human operators simply sit at the controls while AI-driven robots and robotic systems manage the entire process, the entire assembly line of what takes place and what's underway here as well. One of the areas that I think we really need to think seriously about is to pivot away from worrying about ChatGPT and think about how AI can make a huge difference in terms of our reshoring and restarting our industrial economy and our manufacturing economy. Big opportunity there, which again, the technology is here. It's here in the United States to do this, but our government hasn't really had the kind of serious focus that it needs to do.
So, a last question, tying this, for example, to your book, Freedom's Forge. We have a history in the United States of harnessing in that case, our industrial capacity. In this case, you would be talking about sort of something much grander or more abstract than our industrial capacity,
or more pervasive,
but more pervasive. But that we have a free society. We have we have access. Individuals and have access to capital, and that when called upon to help save democracy from the Nazis, for example, you had this sort of full-on commitment to production and innovation. We built the world's most powerful army in a year. From 1942, basically. These numbers, like I don't know how many thousands of tanks we built in a year, not even having a tank assembly line, and that sort of thing. Are we in a position here where if there were a common understanding of the common threat, that this could take place as well, the opportunity to take place, but ideologically, are the people who do this, are they willing to do it? Would they believe that it's important for America to remain the leader, that an authoritarian country like China cannot be allowed to take the lead here? Or are they ideologically such sort of globalists and interdependency evangelists and all of that they would shy away from the jingoistic notion that they have a responsibility to make sure that their country remains the most powerful in the world?
A great question. And I guess in a way, John, what you're sort of saying, would you be able to could I look ahead in writing in 2030 an updated version of Freedom's Forge, which was about how we harnessed America's AI capacity, right?
Right.
To build and to defeat the enemies of freedom and to save freedom and democracy around the world, including for ourselves as well. I'm optimistic enough to think it's possible to do, but there are use cases that run the other way. And I think that it's useful to think about what happened with Project Maven, for example. That was when the Defense Department asked Google to prepare a facial recognition program to help them to identify terrorists. And the Google employees revolted and said they wouldn't do it, that they were not going to be party to developing software that could be used to target and blow up those who were identified as terrorists. Now, a lot of that, I think, a lot of the problems that arose from that Google case, which gave a lot of pause at the Department of Defense, like, whoa, are we going to have real trouble getting Silicon Valley involved in helping us and support our efforts with this? A lot of that was the people who had been pushing Project Maven and developing it and spent years doing it were so focused and so dedicated to the task that they forgot about the importance of messaging, and that they were facing employees at Google who had, been brought up on images of Abu Ghraib, of Gitmo, of these aren't terrorists, they're just, helpless Pakistanis who get blown up by, predator strikes and so on, and didn't want to have any part of that. They didn't want to be involved with that. But we're not talking about that kind of scenario anymore. We're talking about not about, killing Pakistanis as they're driving to the grocery store, right, with Hellfire missiles. We're talking about China. We're talking about a totalitarian society which has enormous human rights abuses, which are happening right now, or taking place right now. And I think that I think the other big change that's happened for Silicon Valley and for big tech as well, they've seen what happens when they try to do business with China. China steals their IP. They develop companies that are clones, that are mirror images of the American companies, and then run away with the technology in order to steal market share. That doing business in China is not really a great idea going forward. So I think there's an opportunity to draw big tech in the way we drew big automobile companies, the big electronics companies during World War II, and to turn them loose and turn their innovation and energy loose on building an AI arsenal that'll protect us, protect freedom, and will really give pause to what China is trying to do and what they're underway. But first, you have to understand what the enemy is doing. We couldn't have done the World War II model if we weren't aware about what Nazi Germany was doing, what Imperial Japan was doing, right, what their systems looked like, what their goals were. And I want this article to help clarify the moral as well as the technological frontier that we're moving on and need to push back against.
Well, Arthur Herman, your piece, China and Artificial Intelligence, the Cold War We're Not Fighting, in the July-August issue of Commentary. Go to commentary.org and read Arthur's piece, subscribe to the magazine. This has been a very sobering and enlightening conversation, and the piece is even more sobering and even more enlightening than we could do it justice with this brief time we've had with you. So thank you so much for writing it, for being with us today. We will look, maybe we can write something more, we don't have to wait till 2030 to write something more.
Maybe we don't.
Who knows? We'll see what the next year's events will bring. And for Abe Greenwald, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.